My name is Janet Miller, and at 58, I never imagined my daughter would betray me like this. I'm getting married tomorrow. Your car and house are sold. Bye. Those words from Sophia's midnight call shattered my world as I lay in a hospital bed recovering from emergency surgery. What she didn't know was that the house she thought she controlled wasn't actually hers to sell, not legally anyway. Before I share how this nightmare unfolded, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join me for more real-life stories of family betrayal and redemption. I dedicated my entire life to my daughter Sophia. After her father walked out when she was just 3 years old, I was determined to give her everything I never had growing up. I put my nursing career on hold, taking only part-time shifts at the local hospital, so I could be there for every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every mini moment that mattered. Those early years were beautiful despite our struggles. Sophia was a bright, vivacious child with her father's hazel eyes and my stubborn determination. We were a team, just the two of us against the world. When Sophia was 13, after years of scrimping and saving every penny, I finally managed to buy our modest 3-bedroom home in a nice suburb. Nothing fancy, but it had a small backyard where I planted a garden and a cozy kitchen where we'd bake cookies on Sunday afternoons. That house represented everything I'd worked for: security, stability, a permanent place to call our own after years of moving from one rental to another. "Mum, is this really ours?" Sophia had asked, spinning around in her new bedroom, the walls still bare and waiting for her posters and photos. Forever and ever. "Yes, sweetheart, I'd promised. This is our forever home." Looking back, I should have noticed the early warning signs of Sophia's materialistic tendencies. While other kids were content with whatever toys they received for Christmas, Sophia always wanted the most expensive brand name items. She'd cry if her clothes weren't from the right stores, insisting she needed to fit in with her wealthier classmates. I chalked it up to normal teenage insecurity and worked extra shifts to afford the things she wanted. As Sophia entered high school, I finally returned to full-time nursing. The hours were long and the work physically demanding, but it paid well enough to maintain our modest lifestyle and save for Sophia's college fund. My colleagues often asked why I never took vacations or bought anything nice for myself. The answer was simple: every spare dollar went towards Sophia's future. Those high school years were challenging. Sophia began showing signs of manipulation that I naively mistook for normal teenage rebellion. She'd play on my guilt as a single mother, using phrases like, "if Dad were here," or "other mums would understand," to get what she wanted. When she was accepted to an expensive private university, her dream school, I took out a second mortgage on the house to help cover the costs that her partial scholarship didn't. "You're the best mum ever," she'd said when I showed her the acceptance letter and told her not to worry about the money. I still remember how she hugged me that day, one of the last genuine embraces we would share. I was so proud of my smart, beautiful daughter and so blind to what she was becoming. I worked double shifts at the hospital, picked up weekend hours, and even took a part-time job at a nursing home to make ends meet. My small Toyota sedan, purchased used with over 100,000 miles on it, was my faithful companion on those late-night drives home after exhausting shifts. It wasn't fancy, but like our house, it was paid for with honest work and represented my independence. I should have seen that while I was working myself to exhaustion, Sophia was developing a sense of entitlement to the comfortable life I provided. But love can be the most effective blindfold, and I was wearing mine tightly convinced that my sacrifices would someday be appreciated. College changed Sophia in ways I never could have predicted. She came home that first Thanksgiving break, wearing clothes I couldn't have afforded with a month's salary, and talking about her new friends whose parents owned vacation homes and took international trips. I was just happy to see her flourishing, making connections with people who could open doors for her future. "You should see Brittany's family estate, Mum," she said over our simple Thanksgiving dinner. "They have a pool house that's bigger than our entire home. The way she said "our home" held a new tone, almost apologetic, as if our modest house had become a source of embarrassment. By sophomore year, Sophia rarely called except when she needed money for essential expenses that somehow included spring break trips and designer handbags. When she did visit, she spent most of her time on her phone, sighing dramatically at our outdated furniture and making helpful suggestions about how I could update our home with money I didn't have. That Christmas, Sophia announced she was dating someone named Bradley Harrington III. His family owns a chain of luxury hotels, she informed me, as if reciting his most important quality. They have a winter home in Aspen and summer property in the Hamptons. When Bradley finally came to visit during junior year spring break, I understood why Sophia had been reluctant to bring him home. He was polite, but clearly uncomfortable in our modest surroundings, his designer clothes and casual references to family vacations in Europe, creating an invisible but palpable barrier. I caught Sophia wincing when I mentioned my work at the hospital, quickly changing the subject to her internship prospects at prestigious firms. "Your mum's a nurse, that's noble," Bradley had said, the pause before noble speaking volumes about what he really thought. After that visit, the transformation accelerated. Sophia dyed her hair blonde, started speaking with a slight affectation that mimicked Bradley's East Coast accent, and during one painful phone call asked if I would consider not mentioning that I was just a nurse when meeting Bradley's parents. "Maybe you could say you're in healthcare administration," she suggested. "It just sounds more professional." The words stung like alcohol on an open wound. I had spent decades saving lives, holding hands of dying patients, working holidays and weekends to provide for her, and now my profession was something to be ashamed of. Bradley's family made their disapproval of Sophia clear from the beginning. During their first meeting, his mother had apparently asked about Sophia's background code for whether she came from money. When Sophia admitted her mother was a single parent who worked as a nurse, Mrs. Harrington's smile had frozen in place. "Well, we all have to start somewhere," she'd said with artificial brightness that Sophia recounted to me later through tears. Instead of recognizing this snobbery for what it was, Sophia became determined to prove herself worthy of the Harrington family. She began fabricating stories about our family having old money that we'd lost, implying I'd chosen nursing as some sort of charitable calling rather than necessity. She bought clothes she couldn't afford, maxing out credit cards. I didn't know she had all to maintain the illusion she was creating. Meanwhile, I was growing increasingly lonely. My few friends were mostly colleagues who were busy with their own families. I had spent so many years focused solely on Sophia that I had little else in my life. Each dismissive phone call and shortened visit carved another piece from my heart, leaving me wondering what I had done wrong. My health began suffering under the weight of emotional stress and physical overwork. At 57, I was experiencing frequent migraines, elevated blood pressure, and crushing fatigue. My doctor warned me to reduce my stress and hours, but with Sophia's final year of college expenses still looming, and my own retirement practically non-existent, cutting back wasn't an option. "You need to take care of yourself, Janet," my friend and fellow nurse Diane urged after finding me crying in the break room one night. "Sophia is an adult now. You've done your part." But maternal love doesn't have an off switch, and I couldn't bear the thought of letting Sophia down, even as she was pulling away from me. I told myself things would improve once she graduated and settled into adult life, that the distance between us was just a phase. I couldn't have imagined how wrong I was. The chest pains started during a particularly stressful shift in the ICU. At first, I dismissed them as indigestion or anxiety, but when my left arm began tingling and the pressure increased, my colleagues sprang into action. Within minutes, I went from being a nurse to being a patient in my own hospital. "We need to run some tests, Janet," Dr. Martinez said with the grave expression I'd seen him use with countless patients. "Your EKG is showing some concerning patterns." The diagnosis came quickly. Severe coronary artery blockage, requiring immediate intervention. I needed bypass surgery, and soon. The irony wasn't lost on me. After decades of caring for patients with heart conditions, I had neglected my own health to the point of crisis. I called Sophia with shaking hands, terrified not just of the surgery, but of being alone through this ordeal. To my surprise, she arrived at the hospital the very next day, seemingly concerned and attentive in a way she hadn't been in years. "Mum, you've always taken care of me," she said, holding my hand as I was being prepped for pre-surgical tests. "Now it's my turn to take care of you." Her words were like a balm to my wounded heart. Maybe this crisis would bring us back together, restore the closeness we'd lost. For the first time in years, Sophia stayed by my side for hours, asking questions of the doctors and taking notes about my condition. She seemed so mature, so responsible, my little girl, all grown up. The day before my surgery, Sophia arrived with a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "There's some paperwork we need to handle before your operation," she explained, her voice gentle but insistent. "Just some routine documents so I can help manage things while you recover." The papers looked official, and in my medicated, anxious state, I trusted her completely. She pointed to various signature lines explaining that these would allow her to handle my bills, talk to insurance companies, and manage household matters during my recovery. "It's just a standard power of attorney," she assured me, as I signed page after page, the words swimming before my eyes. "Temporary, of course, just until you're back on your feet." I remember feeling grateful for her foresight for taking this burden from my shoulders when I needed to focus on healing. The nurse administering my pre-surgical medications witnessed the signatures, and Sophia tucked the documents away with a satisfied smile. The surgery was successful, but grueling. I spent 2 days in intensive care before being moved to a regular room for what would be a lengthy recovery. The doctors warned me that full healing would take months and I would need assistance at home for at least the first few weeks after discharge. Sophia visited daily at first, bringing flowers and helping me walk the hospital corridors, as instructed by my physical therapist. But as the days passed, her visits grew shorter and less frequent. She was always rushing off to important meetings or to handle things at the house. When I asked about specific bills or insurance claims, her answers became vague and evasive. "Don't worry about any of that, Mum," she'd say, patting my hand dismissively. "I've got everything under control." A week into my hospital stay, I noticed my mail wasn't arriving as expected. When I mentioned this to Sophia, she casually mentioned she had set up mail forwarding to her apartment to make things easier. "But I'm expecting some important documents," I protested. "I'll bring anything important," she assured me. "You need to focus on healing, not paperwork." My cell phone began redirecting to voicemail after the first ring, something Sophia explained away as poor hospital reception. But when my neighbour Linda tried repeatedly to reach me about collecting my newspaper, she eventually called the hospital directly. "Janet, I've been trying to reach you for days," Linda said during her visit. "There have been strangers coming and going from your house. Sophia said they were cleaners, but they've been taking measurements and bringing in what looks like staging furniture." A cold dread settled in my stomach. Something was very wrong, but in my weakened state, I couldn't piece it together. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Sophia was just preparing the house for my return, perhaps hiring a cleaning service as a kindness. 2 weeks after my surgery, still groggy from pain medication and with weeks of recovery ahead, I finally began to understand what was happening. A hospital social worker came to discuss my discharge plan, mentioning that Sophia had inquired about assisted living facilities in the area. "She said you wouldn't be returning to your home," the social worker explained, confusion evident in her expression. "Is that correct?" "What?" "No, I'm going home once I'm discharged." I insisted, panic rising in my chest. The social worker looked uncomfortable. You might want to speak with your daughter about this. She was quite adamant that other arrangements would be necessary. That night, I lay awake, despite the medication, a horrible suspicion forming in my mind. I called my bank using the hospital phone only to discover my account access had been changed. When I requested information about recent transactions, I was told that my power of attorney had initiated several large transfers in the past week. The power of attorney, the documents I had signed without properly reading, the trap I had walked right into. The call came at midnight, waking me from a fitful sleep in my hospital room. Sophia's voice was bubbly excited in a way I hadn't heard in years. Mum, I have amazing news. Bradley and I are getting married tomorrow. It's going to be a small ceremony at his parents' estate in Greenwich. We're flying out tonight. My mind struggled to process this information through the fog of pain medication and sleep deprivation. Tomorrow, but I'm still in the hospital. I can't attend a wedding tomorrow. There was a pause, then Sophia's voice turned cool, dismissive. Well, that's why we decided to do it quickly and quietly. No point in waiting when you're going to be recovering for months anyway. Then came the words that would change everything. Oh, and I should tell you I've sold the house and your car. The new owners need possession immediately after you're discharged. But don't worry, I've found a nice assisted living place that accepts Medicaid. Your nursing pension should cover most of it. The room seemed to spin around me. You sold my house, my car. How could you possibly? The power of attorney, Mum, she interrupted impatiently. It gives me authority to manage your assets. And let's be honest, you can't live alone anymore. You're almost 60 and in poor health. This is for your own good. The calculated cruelty of it struck me like a physical blow. My daughter had used my moment of vulnerability to steal everything I had worked for my entire life. The money from the house and car will help Bradley and me with a down payment on a place in his parents' neighbourhood. Sophia continued, as if discussing a normal financial transaction rather than the theft of my life security. His parents are paying for the wedding, but property in their area is so expensive. This way we can live close to them and start our family in the right environment. I clutched the phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Sophia, that house is my home. Everything I own is there. My memories, my life. We'll box up your personal things, she cut in. You can keep what fits in your new room. The furniture is outdated anyway, so I sold most of it with the house. The casual way she dismissed 30 years of my life's work left me breathless. This was the little girl I had read bedtime stories to, the teenager I had stayed up late helping with school projects, the young woman whose education I had sacrificed everything for. How could you do this to me? I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Don't be so dramatic, Mum, Sophia sighed. I'm doing you a favour. You'll be safer in assisted living. They have nurses on staff. You should appreciate that being one yourself. Anyway, I have to go. We're meeting Bradley's parents for dinner before the flight. I'll call you after the honeymoon. Something inside me, some last vestige of maternal protectiveness, perhaps crumbled away in that moment. In its place rose a cold clarity. Okay, I said calmly, but you left out one thing. What do you mean? Sophia asked, irritation evident in her voice. I laughed then, a sound that surprised even me. The house. You left out one very important thing about the house. What are you talking about? Now there was uncertainty in her tone. You'll find out soon enough, I replied. Congratulations on your wedding, Sophia. I hope it's everything you deserve. As I hung up the phone, a strange sense of peace washed over me. Years earlier, when I first noticed Sophia's troubling materialistic tendencies, I had taken a precaution. She knew nothing about a consultation with an attorney that had resulted in special conditions on my house deed, conditions that would now save me from homelessness. I pressed the call button for the night nurse. It was time to contact my lawyer. The next 24 hours unfolded like scenes from a movie I never wanted to star in. After my conversation with Sophia, I asked the night nurse for help, making an urgent call to my attorney Walter Simmons. Despite the late hour, his answering service promised to have him call first thing in the morning. Walter had been my attorney for over 15 years, helping me with the house purchase, and more importantly, with setting up protections I had hoped never to need. When Sophia was in high school and I noticed her first troubling signs of entitlement, I had confided my concerns to Walter during a routine will update. Financial elder abuse often comes from family members, he had warned me. Let's put some safeguards in place, just in case. Those safeguards included specific language in my house deed that prevented sale without secondary verification, regardless of power of attorney status. I had also created a small trust with my life insurance policy as backup, accessible only if my primary residence was compromised. Walter called promptly at 7 a.m., his voice grave when I explained what had happened. "I'm filing an emergency injunction immediately," he assured me. "The house sale cannot be legally completed without the secondary verification we established. As for the power of attorney, we'll have that invalidated based on incapacity and undue influence at the time of signing." By noon, Walter had already filed the necessary paperwork and contacted the title company handling the house sale. The transaction was flagged and frozen pending legal review. Meanwhile, across the country, Sophia's perfect day was unravelling. I later learned from Linda, my neighbour, that a process server arrived at the Harrington estate just as wedding preparations were underway, delivering the emergency injunction and notification of potential fraud charges. At 2 p.m, my hospital room phone rang again. Sophia's voice was unrecognisable, a screeching mixture of rage and panic. "What did you do?" she demanded. "The title company just called. The house sale is blocked. Bradley's parents are asking questions. Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" "I protected what's legally mine," I replied, surprising myself with my steady voice. "The house has a special provision in the deed requiring my in-person verification for any sale regardless of power of attorney. It's a protection against exactly this type of situation." "You don't understand," Sophia wailed. "I told everyone the money was coming. The wedding is in 4 hours. Bradley's parents already think I'm not good enough for their son, and now they'll know." "Know what?" I interrupted. "That you tried to steal from your own mother while she was recovering from heart surgery. Yes, I imagine that would change their opinion of you." There was a long silence broken only by Sophia's ragged breathing. "The car too," I continued. "The title is in a small trust, not in my name directly. Another precaution Walter suggested years ago. You had no legal right to sell it either." "Mom, please." Sophia's voice suddenly turned pleading. "We can work something out. Maybe I was hasty about the assisted living. You could move in with us instead. We'll find space." "Stop," I said firmly. "There is no us anymore, Sophia. Not after this. Walter will be in touch with you about reversing all financial transactions you've initiated with my accounts. If you cooperate fully, we won't pursue criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" she whispered. "You would do that to your own daughter." The question hung in the air between us, heavy with decades of love and sacrifice, and the sharp knife of betrayal that had severed it all. "No," I finally answered. "I wouldn't do that to my daughter, but you stopped being that person when you decided to steal everything from me." I hung up, then my hands shaking but my resolve firm. Within hours, I learned that the Harrington family had postponed the wedding indefinitely after learning about Sophia's actions. Bradley apparently had been horrified by what Sophia had attempted to do, seeing it as a revelation of character he couldn't reconcile with his image of his fiancée. The legal process moved swiftly thanks to Walter's efficiency and the clear-cut nature of the fraud attempt. The power of attorney was invalidated, the house sale voided and the car sale reversed, though the unwitting buyer was understandably upset. But legal victories didn't solve all problems. I was still recovering from major surgery with discharge looming. The house had been partially emptied and would need time to be restored to livable condition, and I was now entirely alone, the last fragile threads connecting me to my only child, irreparably broken. On what should have been my discharge day, I sat in my hospital room waiting for a social worker to discuss temporary housing options when there was a knock at my door. It was Diane, my colleague and friend from the cardiac unit. "I heard what happened," she said, simply sitting beside me. "You're coming home with me until your house is ready. No arguments." As tears filled my eyes, she squeezed my hand. "Family isn't always blood, Janet. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when real family betrays you." For the first time since Sophia's midnight call, I allowed myself to truly cry. The next months were a blur of legal meetings, physical recovery, and emotional upheaval. From Diane's guest room, I slowly rebuilt my life one piece at a time, like assembling a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. The legal consequences for Sophia unfolded rapidly. The attempted fraud was documented in court records, the power of attorney permanently revoked. Walter pushed for full financial accounting of every transaction Sophia had made using my accounts, revealing additional unauthorized purchases, designer clothing, first-class airline tickets for her honeymoon, and a substantial deposit on a luxury apartment in Bradley's neighborhood. "She was planning this for weeks," Walter explained gently as we reviewed the documentation. "The hospital admission just accelerated her timeline." Bradley broke off the engagement completely after the full extent of Sophia's actions came to light. His family, while undoubtedly snobbish, apparently drew the line at outright elder abuse and fraud. I later received a handwritten letter from Bradley himself apologizing for his role in what he called the worst mistake of Sophia's life. "I never encouraged her to do any of this," he wrote, "but I recognize that my family's emphasis on wealth and status created pressure that contributed to her terrible choices. I am deeply sorry for the pain this has caused you." The letter offered little comfort, but did provide some context for Sophia's desperate actions. She had been trying to buy her way into a world that had made it clear she didn't belong, and in her warped reasoning, my modest assets were simply tools to achieve that goal. Meanwhile, my house required substantial work to undo the damage from Sophia's hasty preparations for sale. She had removed family photos, personal mementos, and even furniture I'd owned for decades. Some items were recovered from storage units she'd rented, but others were simply gone sold or discarded in her rush to convert everything to cash. The emotional toll was even heavier than the physical challenges. My heart condition improved with medication and rehabilitation, but the wound of Sophia's betrayal remained raw and painful. I experienced nightmares, anxiety attacks, and periods of deep depression that medication only partially alleviated. 3 months after my surgery, a social worker recommended a support group for victims of family financial abuse. I was reluctant at first, ashamed to admit publicly how completely I had been deceived by my own child. But at the first meeting, listening to others share stories so similar to mine, something shifted inside me. "My son convinced me to add him to my bank accounts, just in case." An elderly man named George recounted, his voice wavering. "Within a month, my retirement savings were gone. Gambling debts," he said, as if that made it better. A woman named Meredith described how her daughter and son-in-law had moved in temporarily after a job loss, then manipulated her into signing over her condo before forcing her into a nursing home under false pretenses. The staff realized something was wrong when I kept asking to go home. They were the ones who helped me get legal help. Story after story echoed pieces of my own experience, creating a tapestry of shared pain, but also resilience. These people had survived, were rebuilding, were finding ways to trust again, despite profound betrayal. "The hardest part," admitted Ruth, A retired teacher whose nephew had stolen her life savings is accepting that someone you loved and trusted completely saw you as nothing but a resource to be exploited. There's a special kind of grief in that realization. That grief became my constant companion as I slowly regained my physical strength. With Diane's help, I eventually moved back into my house, now secured with new legal protections Walter had established. I returned to work part-time, finding healing in the familiar routines of nursing and the community of colleagues who had rallied around me. "We've started a collection to help replace some of your furniture," my supervisor announced one day, presenting me with an envelope of cash and gift cards. "It's not much, but we wanted you to know you're not alone." Their kindness brought fresh tears, but healing ones. I was discovering that while one crucial relationship had been destroyed, many others had deepened through this crisis. 4 months after the wedding that never happened, I received a text message from an unknown number. "Mom, can we talk? Please, I'm so sorry. Sophia." My heart raced, old instincts of maternal love battling with new boundaries of self-preservation. I showed the message to my therapist at our next session. "What do you want to do?" she asked simply. "Part of me wants to give her another chance," I admitted, "but a larger part is terrified of being hurt again." "Both reactions are valid," she assured me. "There's no rule book for this situation. Whatever you decide, make sure it protects your recovery and well-being first." After much consideration, I replied with a single sentence, "I'm not ready to talk yet." It was the hardest text I'd ever sent, but also the most honest. Sophia tried again several times over the following weeks, each message increasingly desperate. I maintained firm boundaries, eventually agreeing only to communicate through Walter if there were practical matters to resolve. "She's facing consequences for perhaps the first time in her life," Walter observed after acting as intermediary for the return of some family heirlooms she had taken. "It may be the best thing for her in the long run, though I know that's cold comfort for you." 6 months after my surgery, I volunteered to speak at a community seminar on preventing elder financial abuse. Standing at the podium, looking out at the attentive faces, many near my own age, I found strength I didn't know I possessed. "Love should never be used as a weapon against you," I told them, "and taking steps to protect yourself isn't distrust, it's wisdom." The healing wasn't linear. Some days I could think about Sophia with something approaching compassion, recognizing how her own insecurities and the pressure of fitting into Bradley's world had warped her judgment. Other days, the rage and hurt would return full force, leaving me gasping for breath at the magnitude of her betrayal. But slowly, incrementally, I rebuilt my life. I redecorated my house, creating new memories to replace those that had been tainted. I expanded my circle of friends, joined a gardening club, and even adopted an older cat from the shelter who needed a second chance at a loving home. 1 year after the midnight phone call that changed everything, I sat in my garden on a warm summer evening listening to birdsong and sipping tea. My neighbour Linda joined me, bringing over homemade cookies and comfortable conversation. "You seem different," she observed. "Stronger." I considered her words, feeling the weight of all that had happened and all I had survived. "I am," I finally replied. "Not in the way I would have chosen, but stronger nonetheless." The wound of Sophia's betrayal would always be part of me, a scar on my heart that ached in certain weather. But it no longer defined me. I had learned that family is not determined by blood, but by respect, honour, and genuine care qualities Sophia had abandoned, but that I had found abundantly in the community that had helped me rebuild. Most importantly, I had rediscovered my own worth. Beyond being someone's mother, a self that existed independently, resilient and whole, despite the broken pieces. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was increasingly a life worth living on my own terms. Looking back now, 6 months after that conversation with Linda, I can see how far I've come. The house that Sophia tried to sell out from under me has become a true sanctuary again. I've painted the walls colours I always wanted, but never dared try planted new flowers in the garden and filled the space with friendships that enrich my life in ways I never expected. My physical recovery progressed steadily under the care of my own colleagues. The irony wasn't lost on me. After decades of caring for others, I was learning to accept care myself. My cardiac function improved to near normal with medication and lifestyle changes, and I eventually returned to nursing full-time, though I switched from the high-stress ICU to working with cardiac rehabilitation patients. "You understand what we're going through in a way other nurses can't," one of my patients told me. Not just the physical recovery, but the emotional one. He was right. My experience had given me a new level of empathy for patients facing life-changing medical events. I began incorporating emotional support into my practice more intentionally, recognizing how vulnerability during illness can leave people open to exploitation just as it had me. The support group became a cornerstone of my healing journey. From being the newest, most shell-shocked member, I gradually transitioned to helping newcomers navigate their fresh pain. We formed bonds that transcended our individual traumas, celebrating each small victory in reclaiming our lives and dignity. 3 months ago, I received a formal letter from Sophia. Unlike her earlier attempts at contact, this one came through Walter, respecting the boundaries I had established. The letter was lengthy, 10 handwritten pages of apology, explanation, and reflection. "I became someone I don't recognize," she wrote. "Someone so desperate for acceptance from Bradley's family that I was willing to sacrifice the one person who had always loved me unconditionally. There is no excuse for what I did, only deep and lasting shame." She went on to describe the aftermath of her failed wedding and the hard lessons she had been forced to confront. Bradley had ended their relationship permanently. His family had cut all ties. Her elaborate lies had unraveled, leaving her reputation in tatters among their social circle. She had lost her job at a prestigious firm when news of the fraud attempt spread through professional channels. "I hit rock bottom," she continued. "Unemployed, alone, and facing the reality of who I had become. I started therapy not to win you back, but because I couldn't live with myself anymore." The letter concluded not with a request for reconciliation, but with a simple acknowledgement. "You owe me nothing. I broke something precious beyond repair. I only want you to know that I understand the magnitude of what I did, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the mother I so callously discarded." I read the letter several times, emotions washing through me in waves: grief, anger, and finally a quiet acceptance. I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process with my therapist and friends. "Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation," my therapist reminded me. "You can release the anger for your own healing without allowing Sophia back into your life." After careful consideration, I wrote a brief response, acknowledging her apology without promising a relationship. "I appreciate your honesty," I wrote. "I hope your journey toward healing continues. Mine is ongoing as well." It wasn't the mother-daughter reunion Sophia might have hoped for, but it was the most authentic response I could offer. Some betrayals change relationships permanently, and I had learned to accept that reality without letting it define my future. The experience transformed not just my relationship with Sophia, but my entire perspective on family. Blood ties, I realized, are just one type of connection. The family I built in the aftermath of betrayal, Diane, who opened her home to me, Walter, who fought fiercely for my rights, my colleagues who contributed household items when mine were sold, the support group members who understood my pain without explanation. This chosen family proved far more reliable than the biological one that had failed me so. My story isn't unique. Elder financial abuse happens with alarming frequency, often perpetrated by the people closest to the victim. What made my case unusual was the foresight that protected me from complete financial devastation, the legal precautions that seemed almost paranoid when I implemented them, but ultimately saved me from homelessness. Today, I speak regularly at community centres and retirement homes, sharing my experience and practical advice for protecting against such exploitation. Trust but verify has become my mantra. Love doesn't preclude prudence. The most profound lesson from this painful chapter has been learning to value myself independently of my role as a mother. For decades, I had defined my worth through Sophia's needs and achievements. Her betrayal forced me to recognize my intrinsic value not as someone's mother, but as Janet Miller, a woman of strength, compassion, and resilience. I still have moments of profound sadness when I see mothers and daughters shopping together or sharing meals in restaurants. The relationship I thought I had with Sophia is gone forever, replaced by a cautious, distant civility maintained largely through third parties. But alongside that grief, I've discovered new joy in friendships, in meaningful work, in the simple pleasure of creating a life that reflects my authentic self rather than someone else's expectations. The house that Sophia tried to sell stands as a symbol of both my worst trauma and my greatest triumph, the place where betrayal occurred and resilience was born. Each morning when I wake in my own bed, in my own home, I experience a moment of profound gratitude for the intuition that led me to protect myself years before the threat materialized. If my story serves any purpose beyond my own healing, I hope it's to remind others, especially women, who have centered their lives around family, that self-protection isn't selfish. It's necessary. Love and trust are beautiful gifts, but they should never come at the expense of your security and well-being. Life after betrayal isn't just possible. It can be rich, meaningful, and joyful in ways you might never have discovered otherwise. The path is neither straight nor easy, but each step forward is a victory worth celebrating. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've experienced family betrayal or financial abuse, please know you're not alone. Share your experiences in the comments below if you feel comfortable. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and healing, and hit that like button if this resonated with you. Remember, sharing these stories helps others recognize warning signs in their own lives. Most importantly, be kind to yourself as you navigate your own journey, whatever form it takes. You are worthy of protection, respect, and genuine love.